Vladimir Zaha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to meet you. It's great to be here.
Tell us what you do for a living.
I work for iProof. It's a British company, and we deal with biometric security, research and prevention of biometric security attacks. Primarily, we are focusing against combating fraud and identity reappropriation by specific threat actors. A lot of the work that we do is very much research based and scientific based.
Cool. So you're basically making it so people can't hack your face, basically.
Yes, essentially, yeah, and especially with the prevalence of AI nowadays and deepfakes, face swaps, and all of these beautiful capabilities that now are in everyone's hands. This is becoming a much bigger threat to a lot of companies.
This is not the topic of discussion today, but tell us, how does one go about hacking a face recognition software?
Essentially, how they go about it is obviously there's implications of whether or not they have the passwords and the credentials in a leak to a particular person, but they might just simply want to create a new account, for example, with a bank and not have that account linked to them, because then they can operate that account for their own reasons without fear of repercussions from authorities. How they do it is mostly through an advanced technique, which is the main reason why we have a security operations center detecting these attacks and a threat intelligence team, which I'm a part of, is they perform injections on either mobile or on web applications that these banks or institutions utilize, and they try to inject their own arbitrary imagery. So instead of them scanning their face and proving their liveness, they inject either an AI-generated model from scratch or a face swap on their real bodies, but a separate synthetic face. And we have mitigations in place for all of this, but there are so many different types of attacks that, of course, it's a thing to look out for constantly, right? Because it's always evolving. And you've seen the pace at which these tools have evolved recently, and AI has evolved recently. And it's most AI models that have reached a particular level of maturity are fully capable of generating imagery, if it's the case for image models. But even to write a script that can do this for you, many models are capable of this already.
And you work with threat intelligence because you're to keep up to date with that. So you follow the threat landscape and what people are doing on Telegram and all these places.
Absolutely. And it's thrilling because you see constant movement at any hour of the night. It's literally coming from every possible continent, these pings of intelligence where someone might want to try a new technique or they invent one.
Cool. But you have other hobbies. You have a life outside of work.
I do, and it's also work related. It's also very much aligned with intelligence. I volunteer for the Bellingcat volunteer community, and it's a community crowdsourced group of vetted members that assist with analysis of different data points that might help the Bellingcat staff with processing very large cases.
What's the point of that? What's the point of Bellingcat? What's their purpose?
The point of Bellingcat is to be essentially, in my opinion, they are the only journalistic source of truth that I've seen in today's online world. They are by no means a classical news publication. They take news, what I like to describe as low and slow, which means that facts are not presented immediately as they arrive. They are first verified, they are cross-referenced, and they're sourced to where they come from in order to be able to actually determine the veracity of the facts that are being presented and not just easily get, publication and clicks for the speed of it.
So they're there to verify facts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any other communities that are similar to Bellingcat that you're aware of?
There are fringe communities that, I wouldn't call them fringe necessarily, but they are adjacent to this cause. For example, GeoConfirmed is one that relates to geolocating conflict content. So videos, images from active conflicts around the world. They put them on a map and they require the volunteer members of those community to assist with geolocating and verifying that these events have actually occurred in the places that they're alleged to occur. But in terms of the complete journalistic workflow and the presentation and the assurance that the data is factual, I have not so far met anything similar to Bellingcat.
But they work with open source intelligence, basically. Osint.
Absolutely. Everything needs to be verifiable through sources that are already available on the internet and anyone can find.
When I think of Osint, I think of that challenge, like, where am I? Can you just explain how hard it is or how easy it is to do something like that? Like, I think it's called the Where Am I challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is prevalent on Twitter and other social media. If you search for #OSINT, Where Am I, or challenge, you'll find plenty of people that are trying to see how easily they are able to be found. And essentially, this one case, I believe it referred to simply the shadow of a window being projected onto a white wall with no other context whatsoever. So, at first glance, it was a pretty hard challenge. But I think even when you look at a specific point of data and you feel overwhelmed by the lack of detail in it, you can still find many things. And this speaks a lot to your own experience as a person. For example, if you have architectural knowledge or a background in architecture or in design, you might recognize that a windowsill has a particular shape, or that the light is hitting at a particular angle inside of the building. And if you know about buildings and how they're built, they're mostly desired to be facing either east or west in order to either benefit from dusk or dawn, right? And in this case, I believe it was someone who found the shape of the windowsill was completely atypical, and reconstructing the full shape just from the shadow cast on the wall was able to determine the actual location of the building, and also correlating that with the position of the sun at the point where the image was taken. That actually gave a tremendous amount of information, which, looking or scrolling past the picture, you would not believe this would be the case. But it absolutely is helpful.
So people that work with OSINT, they're puzzle solvers. Very
much so. Yeah, very much people with attention to detail and people with a desire to determine facts.
Besides solving puzzles for fun, because this is a community that a lot of people just do it for fun, you have applied it to other matters. Tell us about some of the things you've applied it to.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the work I've been involved in, these are published articles. I've had the tremendous opportunity to help with monitoring conflict in Ukraine, and this is part of the Civilian Harm in Ukraine time map. And the Civilian Harm in Ukraine time map essentially geolocates videos from Telegram and Twitter and other social media, where it's showcased that missiles were used against civilian populations in certain area throughout the invasion and the war in Ukraine. And there have been vast amounts of data to sift through, of course, and it's not easy, but it's something to remember that there are people who are living through this. And for me, just to be able to look at this and geolocate it is nothing compared to having to live this as a day-to-day. Other projects have been the ICE raids in the US. So the actions and the activity of ICE and affiliated enforcement agencies throughout the US recently, and particularly focusing on the abuse of power from these agencies, especially due to the fact that they are masked and so to speak, unaccountable for what actions they take in the field.
Can you just go into detail about what you actually, the articles that you were about or you were a part of? I'm assuming you're doing that because the U.S. government, they have a story, but there are facts in the world, and their story contradict the facts.
Yeah, absolutely. In my own opinion, I want to say I do participate in this because I have a very strong interpretation of what fairness is. And I believe that what we're seeing coming out of the US, both at the initialization of these agencies and the revival of these agencies, has not been congruent with fairness and how I define it. And I think how many other people define it as well. But absolutely, in terms of analyzing the actions of authoritarianism in today's modern world, you do see the trend of public statements not really matching up with what is seen on the ground, and the invalidation of eyewitness records and victim experiences. the invalidation of these through a simple waving of the hand and saying, no, the legal state has the final opinion on this. This did not happen. And actually our actions are fully compliant with how we normally do things. That's when I feel people need to step in. And that's when I feel Osint is a public tool more than a personal preference, is to search for those facts and make everyone aware that it's not just what one party says. It's actually what is seen and verifiable on the ground.
One of the articles you wrote, the government said that, yeah, this individual drove into a cop car, an unmarked cop car, and then you saw the video, which is just from somebody's iPhone, that the cop car actually ran into her and dragged her out by her feet. So the government says one thing. What are the steps that you actually take to prove this is actually what happened? How'd that look like for you?
There's a bifold approach to this, right? I mean, there's the odd person living in England that wants to verify this and put it out as a fact. But then there's also the citizen part of the particular state where this happens, which I believe has a lot more control over what can happen in the future in that state. So your elected officials, your police departments, how they face the repercussions of these types of actions is also a very valid approach, right? In the case of the open source intelligence analyst, simply having multiple views of the same thing happening, which goes against what a public authority states happened, is already a telltale sign of what actually occurred on that day, right? There's obviously, arguing with AI earlier, there can always be manipulations of this. And I believe Osint analysts around the world have seen at least once an AI manipulated piece of content that aims to disrupt the normal analytical flow in what we do. However, there's verifiable means through which this has not happened with the particular video you're referencing, right? Even though it's easy to tout an overall devil that invalidates everything one person says, I think everyone should be the devil's advocate in this case and actually research it themselves and see there's no artifacts of modified imagery. There's full one-to-one matching between two perspectives from two different observers, is what we call the people with the phones on the sidewalks, right? Two different observers filming the exact same thing with no inconsistencies between the videos is already a 1 in a million chance that this might be a fake, right? You can tell that it's real. In the case of the person living in the state, I believe protesting is one form of reaction to the spread of this type of disinformation from official governing bodies. But at the same time being equipped with the knowledge to perform their own verification of events, being able to hold accountable their states using FOIA requests or any type of public inquiries, or even being prepared to understand the current political situation in their state will help them a lot to protect themselves and their family from this happening to them as well.
But what do you actually do when you analyze these videos to prove? Like, how do you know if they're fake? How do you verify facts? Like, what is the verification process that organizations like Bellingcat would do, or anybody else similar?
Essentially, you're looking at an image. If we simplify it, a video is more complex, and at that point, you get more of a view of what's going around, so it's easier. Let's say it's just a photo. In the case of a photo, you try to break down the visual elements that you're looking at. If we're talking strictly about geolocation, which is a subset of open source intelligence, you need to take each object within the picture as a specific data point that you can research upon. Does the window have a particular frame, which is a thing that we've analyzed before? Does the sun shoot through the window in a particular color? Is it warm? Is it more akin to white or blue color? So is it dusk? Is it dawn? The angle is always a thing to keep in mind regardless, because it can determine roughly a time estimate of when the photo was taken. But then you also need to look at other objects which you might not usually. Is there parquet flooring? Is it hardwood flooring? Is it cement? This will tell you a lot about the building standards in that area. Is the furniture from the 18th century, or is it modern, or is it IKEA? Or does it look like IKEA but it's not quite that? So is it a country that offers mock-up IKEA furniture, which also tells you a lot about where that person is living or what the subject is, or where they're located. And moreover than that, you need to look outside. You need to think outside the box, which is very much a thing that maybe listeners that are from the cybersecurity realm might very much relate to. If they do offensive security, you need to think outside the box. You need to look at the person who posted the photo. Do they normally post within that time frame? Are those their normal active hours, or are they posting at night? This is called pattern of life analysis. And when you look at this, you can deduce, but not with 100% certainty, of course, because nothing is, but you can start to deduce the time zone that the person might be in. So that helps you narrow down a lot, actually. This would be a normal flow for geolocation, but there's, as you can imagine, the many different aspects of the world can be dissected in so many other different aspects of data points that you can look at and you can learn about them. Munitions are one thing. Weather is another one. Knowing how, I don't know, knowing the different models of cars that exist in certain countries, the different street signs that exist in different countries. All of this is a very particular subset of skills that anyone with the background knowledge immediate to the subject might find useful to apply.
You mentioned munitions. When I think of munitions, I think of there's a lot of work being done in Osint in wars, obviously. Munitions is basically to see which sort of mercenaries, which sort of soldiers were there, or can you go into detail about that?
This helps a lot, yeah. It helps a lot to determine what kind of parties have worked together to launch attacks. And especially it points towards the more revealing fact of how many stockpiles a particular army has. For example, if they start using munitions from the Cold War, suddenly, after only using cluster munitions or very advanced guided missiles or any of the sort, if they start suddenly relying on very old, almost close to being recycled munitions, then you can already draw a conclusion from that. It's a lack of resources that pulls this need, or it's a pause before a next very strong assault if they're trying to pull together more resource for the next one. So it can tell you a lot about the mentality of the generals on the battlefield and the decisions that are being made at a very high level. Because no stock is being sent to the front line just by pure choice. There's active logistical solutions that are in play that are different from missile to missile, from munition to munition. For example, a Tornado multiple launch rocket system requires its own loader. You have to now back up the loader on the train and freight it to the front line as well. It's very different from having some, I don't know, mortar shells, right? And it varies from decade to decade of manufacturing these missiles, and you can always tell a lot from what is being used.
There's a podcast that I follow. It's Ukraine Today, Ukraine the Latest, I think it's called. And also a part of that, they have YouTube channels that show you every day what's going on the front line, and it's. I guess some of the military is sharing that for various reasons. Why is this war? Or why are wars so visible these days, or how are they so visible? Is if you go on YouTube and you type in Ukraine or Russia, you see what happened yesterday. Can I trust that information, or how would you look at those types of videos?
That's a very good question, because a lot of people, I believe, are doing the same thing nowadays. I mean, you have a war on continental Europe, which of course shouldn't come to no surprise, unfortunately, due to the political state of in Eastern Europe right now. But a lot of people, I believe, are making these exact Google searches, and it's important to know if you are looking at the right thing. Yeah, you've got channels like Preston Stewart and Ryan McBeth who are doing like an amazing job at dissecting the battlefield and the political decisions behind what is going on in Ukraine. So if you are looking for points of truth, I can personally vouch to the veracity of those accounts. Definitely 100%. However, the wars are becoming more visible now, at least in the Western Hemisphere, where you have this mentality of crowdsourcing and public support, right? If you're looking at an authoritarian government trying to stop a civil war, they're not going to have a Telegram channel or a TikTok channel posting like short clips of what they're doing militarily, whatever is safe to post, right? Because they don't care. They're having a civil war and they're an authoritarian government. But in for example, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you want to garner support from home viewers because pretty much both sides still rely on public donations in order to support their militaries. Like as wild as it seems, Russia, as big as it is, lacks, of course, a lot of equipment and has failed to maintain a lot of its equipment since the last wars that it waged, right? Ukraine, a very much smaller country, ill prepared at the beginning of the war, now a lot better, has very quickly adopted Western mentality in warfare and methodologies that are very compatible with current weapon systems that are being donated to them by the West, right? But they both need just as much crowdsourced financial help, donations, either in terms of like material, like drones or vehicles. Vehicles is a big one because, of course, they are almost dispensable in specific parts, but also just monetary help to buy their own gear, to buy vests, to buy plate carriers, ammunition, and everything else. So you see this trend of everything appearing on social media from the point where it becomes operationally safe to do so. It gets edited, it gets put in a compilation, and it arrives on your phone. And it's quite surprising actually to see some platforms where you might not expect this to exist, like Instagram. You can scroll through and the algorithm will simply suggest frontline combat from Ukraine, which speaks towards the desensitization of audiences towards this type of content. It's also quite ironic that we can sit in our own comfort and suddenly we're looking at someone die on the battlefield in Ukraine.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also garnishes support from people in the West who are seeing this injustice and they want to help.
We're talking about satellite data. You can buy pictures that will tell you. You can see what's going on. How accurate is it satellite data, and how easy is it for somebody like you that knows where to look to actually get that information?
Absolutely. I think the main blocking point there is money, because of course satellite imagery providers are also in touch with what is going on. So obviously, if you are buying extremely accurate satellite imagery down to 1 meter in Ukraine or in Crimea or somewhere in Russia, they're going to get the idea of what is going on. But essentially, there are specific ways in which one can do this, and of course, it helps to be able to represent yourself to an organization rather than an individual randomly going to buy 1 meter imagery. However, they do their own vetting because, of course, they don't want to provide this imagery to, for example, the Russians or to any threat actor that might be interested in joining a conflict, or just anyone realistically, because these are targeting capabilities, right? At that point, you're speaking about targeting capabilities. Ukraine has solved a lot of this cost issue, for example, by crowdsourcing their own satellite. And this helps them operationally to achieve their objectives on the front line, even long distance as well. What I've seen recently, and actually I want this question answered because I'm not quite sure if this is the case, but in Copernicus, which is a online tool, it's a satellite, but it's publicly available satellite imagery on a date selection basis, and it offers different filters and different satellites that are all open source, and you can look at their imagery when they passed over a specific area. The idea is you can look at infrared signatures depending on what's available and what satellite has passed over that area. You may be able to look at infrared signatures or other sort of filters, which is called remote sensing. When you start filtering the image back from the satellite and you filter out different wavelengths, you can see vegetation more clearly than you can see cars or buildings. For example, you can see night lights in urban areas better than you can see the sun reflecting off rooftops, for example. So it lets you remote sense particular materials and areas of interest. I'm seeing now recently with Copernicus, there's these streaks that come at diagonal angles over important parts of Russia and Crimea, which I'm very curious about. I haven't managed to find an answer to this, but it almost looks as if someone is trying to obscure the satellite view from these critical areas because there is a conflict. And looking around the world, nowhere else have I seen these streaks right now. So there's obviously acknowledgement from both sides that these satellites offer open source information about what's being seen from space over these territories. They just want to limit accessibility to this imagery as much as possible.
I should have probably covered this earlier, but open source doesn't mean free. It just means that it's publicly available. You don't have to be a military to get it.
Yes, so there's different approaches to this. Open source originally comes from the fact that, you don't need to be in the intelligence services or in the military to achieve this information. Opposing side we call closed source intelligence, which is what the NSA have and what GCHQ has, which is collection data from who knows what, but from centralized systems that nobody else has access to. Open source data is originally the opposite of that. It's just things that people leave behind publicly, intentionally,
organically.
Think of like dumpster diving but online, right? That's essentially what I do to summarize your previous question. But there's also the concept that you don't need to pay for it, because payment in certain areas implies that not everyone can access it, so it's not democratized. So therefore, if it's not verifiable by everyone, then it's not accessible by everyone. For example, Trace Labs, which is a really great organization from the US, they do capture the flag tournaments where you find missing persons. So they collaborate with police stations and police associations and institutions across the US and Canada, I believe, both of them. And any missing person cases that they get from those police institutions, they offer as a package for the CTF. And essentially you volunteer 100, 500, I'm not sure how many people participate in these. I've personally both been a participant and a coach, but you get crowdsourced intelligence pools about where the whereabouts of these people might be. Some of them are, people who live a very active life. They are active socially, so there's a lot to search through. They are very well connected. All their friends post together with them, so it's easy to cross-correlate where they might be. Others are ghosts. They're simply people that are not using social media, but they might use one account once to check in someplace because someone asked them to leave a review, right? So it takes like different levels of skill sets to try to find as much as possible about these people. And then you submit it in the coach reviews this information to see if it's like valid for what we are looking for. And at the end, what happens is all this information gets submitted back to the police department that requested its review. And a lot of the times, or sometimes, people are found. People are found people are found otherwise, but the family gets an answer. And one of the particularities of the CTF is that open source intelligence, in this case, does need to mean free. Because when you give this information back to the police station, or might it be a detective, might it be someone else in the police station, you don't know who gets this information and if they have the technical capability to review it, right? You cannot give them like terminal output from an automated collection tool. You need to give them factual evidence that they know how to access and is easy for them as well. So part of it is, it can be paid. They need to be able to access it straight away.
How do you use Osint and cyber? The majority of people listening to this episode in the Mnemonic Security podcast are cybersecurity professionals. How would Osint help them in their job? Or is there a connection there between their protecting a network and Osint?
There is, absolutely. I mean, at least to say the work that I do right now shows there's a direct correlation between the security of a product or of a company and the activities of threat actors that are interested in nabbing those secrets from the company, right? There will always be a vested interest of someone to break into something. This is just the nature of criminality. And to be one step ahead doesn't just mean to implement your EDR or to implement your SOC team or to install, MDM and antiviruses on your laptops. To be one step ahead means to be in tune with what's going on in your operational environment. And it's very much what intelligence agencies do. It's very much what the military does. It's awareness of your operational environment, right? If you don't know that anyone has a vested interest or has posted on a forum to get help to hack your company, or to find more information about you personally, the head of security of a company, if you don't know how to search these spaces, if you're completely oblivious to them, you can't rely on automated tools for this, because the traffic is so organic and the behavior of threat actors is so varied and in different languages, right? You can only do this yourself. You can only understand this at a human level. So it very much helps security professionals, I believe, even though in CTFs, I think Osint is a little bit misrepresented. It's a little bit simplified, and it's synthetically generated to make you find a flag on someone's, like a sock puppet's Twitter account, right? But Osint in real life is so much more different, because you've got so much more data to sift through, and it's all organic, so it's all random. You can't classify it. You can't really put a tag on it. You need to learn how to look.
Just put this in perspective. When you're protecting your company, the company you work for, which is, you basically need to follow a bunch of, like, I'll call them underground environments, to see how threat actors are planning to, do something against facial recognition software. That's a very much B2C sort of use case.
It's more so B2B, because
B2B, but they're protecting their clients, so it's B2C, or
correct, yeah, but through proxy, kind of. Yeah,
I see what you,
yeah, because the person opening an account with a bank, for example, can never be held liable for someone bypassing the biometric system that the bank uses, right? That's the bank's fault, or it's the bank's third-party service provider fault. So mostly what we do is trying to raise awareness into this new field, which is biometrics. And especially in this, well, it's not a new field, but it's a new implementation of this, because you're seeing now also there being a social media uproar about the overusage of these tools to verify you on social media, to make sure you're over 16, over 18, depending on the country, whatever, to make sure you're an adult. My opinion, overusage. But to prevent threat actors from entering your bank account, sure, no problem. That makes sense. To prevent people or unknown persons from coming into through the border of the country, sure, yes, your passport needs to match your face and who you are in real life, right? This all makes sense. What we do is we try to create awareness of this issue, which is expanding not only the border controls and financial institutions, but everywhere else as well. So identity fraud can happen pretty much at any point, because there's steps you can take to escalate your control over this victim's identity as a threat actor. And the more you do, the more voracious your identity now becomes. And suddenly someone's got a hold of your SIM card number and they perform the SIM jack attack on you, right? The thing is, we create these reports, they're called Apex reports. And these reports are given to customers, showcasing not only the typical industries that are being affected, which is what you expect, borders, financial, but it's everything that we see. And it's the trends and the data that we pull from our own system being attacked as well. So we are at the tip of the spear right now in what's, as an implementation, biometric security. And we are obviously the most coveted kind of attack surface, if you would like. The insight from that helps companies that do not utilize us also to prepare and to make steps to protect themselves without the need for them to one click buy a solution, and that's the end of the day. It's the knowledge that saves them, not the solution.
I have to ask it, the concept of AI. I have colleagues that they're just vibe coding tools that are able to do things that they were reserved for nation states before, but now you can just vibe code your way to it because you don't need developers anymore. You can just use some tokens on it. How is AI changing the world of Osint? Because I would assume that a lot of the things that you would have to do very manually before are just completely automated now. Have you noticed that in your journeys?
When did I not have a need, or any Osint analyst or any security person in general, when did we not have a need that we were like, I wish I had a tool for that, but it costs like £5,000 a month, so I can't. It's like, no, you can code them, you can make it. And there have been people who have done like Palantir at home. And even just as a visualization tool, it's powerful because you get to present things in front of non-technical people and they understand, because it has like nice spinny graph of the world and you can tell where the subject is in the map. But also information collection solutions, automated reporting, all of these, they're useful. Everyone just needs to keep in mind that it's intelligence, guys. Like, you need to verify it, right? Part of it is collection, but part of it is analysis. And you need to make sure that once you analyze, the intelligence is not hallucinated, it's veracious, it's, pinpointed in time and space exactly as you might want it to present to another person.
Just to end on a philosophical note or forward-thinking note, like the future of Osint, how do you think that's going to affect democracy moving forward?
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about recently, especially obviously with the death of factual analysis of news.
As in nobody gives a shit about the facts anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially with this, I'm asking, is it going to die? Or I don't think so. Or is it going to become finally paid enough for more people to do this? I mean, these are two of the pain points that I've seen, at least in here and in other countries. Osint doesn't pay. It's so disregarded in terms of its efficacy as well. For example, one of the struggles that people are having right now, unrelated to what I've done before, but with the Kherson and Bakhmut war crime investigators, currently prosecuting cases against persons in the Russian government or the Russian army. It's the attempt to get this Osint collected information valid in court. It's still a struggle. And just because it came from not an analyst in a government office using the analyst's notebook software, and instead they use Maltego or like a Telegram scraper they wrote themselves, just because of that it's invalid. Like, it can go through the same validation process as everything else. It's just a lack of education about Osint and its functionality and how much it has evolved over time that is causing this lag behind the normal systems.
So it's a tool. You name Analyst Notebook. I used to work for IBM, so I know what Analyst Notebook is.
I really want a subscription, by the way.
Yeah. You can buy it from one of my friends, but it's going to cost you. So it's the tool and also the person that you are, the authority that you represent.
Yes.
That's what sort of
I think that's
works in court.
I think that's the secret sauce. I mean, obviously you have I'm not a legal expert or anything, but there's also like a chain of custody, and there's a requirement for the storage of this information to make sure it wasn't modified in transit and storage or when opening it just to view it, right? It's the same as computer forensics, pretty much. It's the same standards there. The information cannot at any point be any different than from the point of collection. And the point of collection preferably needs to still be available in order to be able to be verified that it was indeed the source that it was collected from. There's so many instances of this happening. I don't think it's an issue of scarcity. I think it's an issue of accepting technology, which is not new anymore, accepting methodology and desire to volunteer, which is, again, not new anymore. But it does come from kind of an older institution, which is the Hague, right? Or the International Criminal Court, which very much relies still on processes that have been established over years to ensure the utmost efficacy when prosecuting war criminals, which is understandable why it's monolithic and why it's hard to get it to move, right? But this speaks to other courts and other industries even as well.
But like if I was to film you right now with an iPhone,
I would hate
the
you.
metadata. Yeah, right. You need to have you deserve a better camera. I'd agree. But like all the metadata is going to be in that film, right? Like as somebody that works with iOS forensics will be able to say that's 100% legit. So the fact is still a fact. And even though I took it and nobody trusts me because I've had a beer or two, that's still a fact.
Yeah, it's still a fact. I mean, you could always modify it. You could use, EXIF tools to modify the metadata for that video. But as long as that iPhone doesn't touch anything else, or at least it's provable that anything else it has touched hasn't been able to interfere with the metadata of that video, then it's provable in court, right?
Can that be proven? Is that possible to do as well? Or is it just word? Is it still word against word at the end of the day?
It's word against word. It's legal matters, I believe. I believe it is word against word. I mean, anything can be proven only up to a point of credibility, right? I mean, if you look at fingerprints, for the longest time, there has been a debate if fingerprints are realistically admissible in court, right? Because of different factors, which I'm not fully aware of, so I'm not going to speak about them. But the veracity and the correlation between the subject and its fingerprint has always been in question, at least at the beginning of fingerprints as well. And now I think I've seen recently another question about this. Like, have we been relying on this tool for prosecuting individuals the wrong way this whole time? Not sure. Watch the video. But yeah, there's always new things that we learn about the world. There's always new things that appear in technology that suddenly change everything. Like how many times have analysts had tools that they relied on almost at a forensic level completely disappear off the face of the planet, or suddenly they're monetizing and they're like popping like mobile game ads in the in the interface, right? This is like completely possible for someone who relies on a tool. It's out of our control because it is open source. For example, just one more note there, actually, one of the things that OSINT analysts or people aspiring to be OSINT analysts need to do is, sure, you can do it one time. You can do it instantaneously if you just want to research something in the moment. You just download some tools that might help you, but it's mostly manual work, no problem there. If you plan to do it at scale or over a longer period of time, what you need to be aware of is tool deprecation. And for example, with Bellingcat, one of the projects is constantly evolving and constantly present, and a need for the community is the Bellingcat toolkit, which is essentially a Gitbook page, a Gitbook instance, which holds all of the tools that we have vetted that are not me, it's mostly Bellingcat staff, but we can volunteer for these things. So we look at if they contain sponsorship links or any tracking methods within the tool, if the tool is safe to use in a terminal, if it takes certain commands to install. Like we look at all of these parameters, and you need to validate. Is it still up to date? Has anything changed? Is anything broken? Is anything fixed? So keeping it up to date is a big part of it. Same goes for sock puppet accounts. Your investigative accounts that you need to look after and grow as if they're your own, because you are posing as a real person.
On behalf of the world, thank you for all the great work that you do. As the Brits would say, Vlad, you're a good lad.
Thank you so much.
Take care of yourself.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep up the great work. Thank you.